Assalamu alaikum students. Today we are back again with strategic management, and our topic, as I had promised you last time, is the external assessment. This, as you may have noticed, is chapter 3 in your book, and as I had asked you, requested you to read the chapter before sitting for the session, and I hope that you have done so, and I also hope that you are now familiar with most of the terms that we are using in strategic management. Well, we will take up this particular chapter, which, as I said to you last time, is reasonably long, not very long, but reasonably long, and we shall take it up not in one session, but in about 3 or 4 sessions. However, the subject today is external assessment, and let us see what are the outlines of this chapter. The chapter outlines: 1. The nature of an external audit. 2. The economic forces. 3. Social, cultural, demographic, and environmental forces. Beyond this, we have more to come: political, governmental, and legal forces, technological forces, competitive forces. And then furthermore, within the chapter again, we shall also be discussing competitive analysis, which is Dr. Michael Porter's 5 forces model, and we shall also take up sources of external information, forecasting tools and techniques. And then we will talk about the global challenge, we'll talk about industry analysis, the external factor evaluation matrix, also known popularly as the EFE matrix, and then we shall do the competitive profile matrix, and that's about all as far as the outline of this chapter is concerned. So today, ladies and gentlemen, again, as I have mentioned to you earlier, we'll talk about the external assessment. The famous physicist, Dr. Niels Bohr, he said that prediction is a very difficult task. Why? Because it's not so easy to predict, and especially about the future. When it comes to predicting about the future, it is indeed a difficult task. And external analysis is nothing but trying to see the external environment with an eye on the future. How is it going to affect us? How is it going to affect our fellow employees, our management, and most of all, how is it going to affect our competitors as well? Because we have to be always alert to what's going on around us as well. This external analysis is also known as the environmental scanning, and some people prefer to call it the industry analysis. The environmental scanning, as we know it, is not related to the other environment that we usually refer to. This environment is the environment of the industry, and that is the reason why precisely some people in the academics or in the academia prefer to call it the industry analysis. As you can see on this slide here, we are continuing with the external strategic management audit, and we try to define it as identification and evaluation of trends and events beyond the control of a single firm. This is all the more important because of increased foreign competition and because of demographical changes, for example, the population shift. And if we go on to the next slide, as I'm going to show you, the same identification and the evaluation trends are also related to the aging society, to information technology, and to computer revolution. Let's talk about this in a little more detail. Why or where or in what area do we need to do an external audit? It is usually because of the increased population, and it is because of the increased competition that is coming on. It is because of the aging society, it's because of the tremendous changes that are taking place in the information technology, and finally because of the revolution that we have seen and witnessed in our lifetime regarding the computer technology. So on this slide here, we have the nature of external audits. And when we talk about the nature of external audits, we would like to know the purpose. And the purpose here mainly is to develop a finite list of opportunities and threats, opportunities that need to be availed and threats that need to be avoided. This, dear students, as we try to understand the nature of strategic management in the earlier part of our sessions, here in this session we will try to understand the nature of external audits. And when we say the nature of external audits, we would like to see what is the purpose. The purpose here is to develop a finite list of threats and opportunities of factors that are affecting us. And this list, why do I say should be finite? It does not necessarily mean that we will limit it to just maybe 3 or 4 of the factors that affect us. No. The finite element here means that it should not be too exhaustive, because if it becomes very exhaustive, it could also become counterproductive. So in order to keep it useful, in order to keep it meaningful, we need to bring in the main important key factors that we can see or we can identify. And these key factors will always relate to the opportunities and to the threats. Opportunities which we think can be availed, opportunities which we think can be really meaningful to the organization, and threats which need to be avoided. Here, as you can see in this slide, there are 5 broad categories into which external forces can be divided. 5 broad categories can be termed as the economic forces, the social, cultural, demographic, and environmental forces, political, governmental, and legal forces, टेक्नोलॉजिकल फैक्टर्स एंड कम्पिटिटिव फोर्सेस। इनको अगर हम देखें तो ये जो 5 ब्रॉड कैटेगरीज हैं, पहली जो है वो इकोनॉमिक फोर्सेस की है, दूसरी सोशल, कल्चरल, डेमोग्राफिक एंड एनवायरमेंटल फोर्सेस, तीसरी जो है उसका ताल्लुक पॉलिटिकल फोर्सेस से है, गवर्नमेंटल फोर्सेस से है या लीगल फोर्सेस से। इसको हम आम फहम ज़बान में रेगुलेटरी फोर्सेस भी कहते हैं, because the government tries or the government is usually regulating these forces. And the fourth one is what we call the technological factors or technological forces. And the last of these 5 broad categories is termed as competitive forces. Competitive forces का आज से कुछ अर्सा पहले तक इस खाने में जिक्र नहीं होता था। जब एक्सटर्नल फोर्सेस की बात करते थे पहले तो 4 ही गिने जाते थे, इकोनॉमिक, सोशल, पॉलिटिकल एंड टेक्नोलॉजिकल। आप में से कुछ ऐसे लोग भी होंगे जिन्होंने इसको पेस्ट एनालिसिस के तौर पे भी पहले पढ़ा होगा। पेस्ट एनालिसिस यही होता था, पॉलिटिकल, इकोनॉमिक, सोशल एंड टेक्नोलॉजिकल। लेकिन अब कुछ अरसे से बाज़ ऑथर्स और बाज़ एकेडमिक्स ऐसे हैं जिनका ख्याल है कि नहीं, अब ये 4 फोर्सेस ही नहीं हैं, अब 5वां फोर्स भी ऐसा है कि उसको रिकग्नाइज करने की और समझने की ज़रूरत है, और ये है कम्पिटिटिव फोर्सेस। कम्पिटिटिव फोर्सेस को हम आगे मज़ीद और बल्कि इन तमाम 5 को ही हम एक एक करके देखेंगे, यही आज का हमारा मेन मौजू होगा। यहाँ ख़वातीन व हज़रात, मैं आपको इस स्लाइड पे वो ताल्लुक़ दिखाना चाहता हूँ जो मेन एक्सटर्नल फोर्सेस और किसी भी अदारे के दरमियान होता है। इसकी हेडिंग हम यूँ कहते हैं, रिलेशनशिप्स बिटवीन की एक्सटर्नल फोर्सेस एंड एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन। इसमें अगर लेफ़्ट पे आप देखेंगे तो यू हैव द की एक्सटर्नल फोर्सेस विच आर डिस्क्राइब्ड एज competitors, suppliers, distributors, creditors, customers, employees, communities, managers, stockholders, labor unions, special interest group, product, services. अब ये जो लिस्ट है बज़ाहिर बड़ी लंबी लिस्ट लगती है, ये वो लोग या वो एलिमेंट्स हैं जिनसे किसी भी अदारे के लिए अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ भी पैदा हो सकती हैं एंड थ्रेट्स. सो दैट इज़ हाउ वी शो द रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन एक्सटर्नल फोर्सेस एंड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. इसको इस तरह भी आप समझ सकते हैं कि एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जब किसी इंडस्ट्री में काम करती है, किसी इंडस्ट्री में मुलव्वस होती है, तो उसके गिर्द बहुत सारे और भी लोग हैं, बहुत सारे और ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं जिनको हम डिस्क्राइब कर सकते हैं इन एलिमेंट्स के तौर पे जो हमने पीछे स्लाइड्स में देखे थे, जिसमें सप्लायर्स भी हैं, कस्टमर्स भी हैं, कंपेटिटर्स भी हैं, स्टॉक होल्डर्स भी हैं, वगैरह वगैरह. और ये तमाम फोर्सेस कह लें या ये तमाम एलिमेंट्स कह लें, आई प्रेफर टू कॉल देम एलिमेंट्स, टू टर्म देम एज एलिमेंट्स, ये वो एंटिटीज़ और एलिमेंट्स हैं जिनसे किसी वक्त किसी भी चेंज के तौर पे जो भी सूरत हाल है उसमें तब्दीली अगर आ जाती है तो या अपॉर्चुनिटी क्रिएट होगी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के लिए, और अपॉर्चुनिटी नहीं तो उससे थ्रेट आ सकती है. एंड वी ऑलवेज हैव टू कीप ourselves very, very alert to these opportunities and to these threats also. Alert to these opportunities because we do not want to miss an opportunity. We need to avail an opportunity as soon as it comes our way. And threats, we need to stay away from them, or we need to reduce the impact of these threats if we can and to whatever extent we can. How do we perform these external audits? Well, the first and foremost and the most important or equally important aspect would be to gather competitive intelligence on these factors. Why do we need to gather competitive intelligence, and what kind of intelligence? When we talk of intelligence, it appears to us as if we are talking of military intelligence, as if we are talking of intelligence related to the defense area. Well, this is no different, I tell you. Absolutely no different. Over the past half a century, almost, if not more than this, organizations have spent not millions, not hundreds of millions, but maybe much more than that. You could say that organizations have spent tons of money only trying to gather information. And at times, organizations have done things which were perfectly legal, perfectly ethical, and at times they have indulged. There have been instances, there have been cases where organizations have indulged in unethical practices. So we do not advocate the use of unethical practices. We do not advocate that organizations should go to that extent, but it is important to say here that all organizations must always try and gather as much of competitive intelligence as it can on factors such as social, cultural, demographic, environmental, economic, political, legal, governmental, and technological. What would you think would it take to gather all this information? As I have referred earlier to military intelligence, would it need a couple of agents, a couple of secret service agents going around, snooping around for information? No, it's not really that. You don't have to be a James Bond to collect this kind of information. All that you need to do is keep one's eyes and ears open, go through periodicals, go through journals. I'll be showing you a slide where some of these prominent journals have been mentioned, these magazines have been mentioned, and organizations usually set aside a couple of executives and give them an extra task of keeping an eye on these factors. And these gentlemen or these ladies who are assigned this task of gathering competitive analysis, all they do is keep going through these magazines and newspapers and journals and what have you on a regular basis. And as soon as they pick up any information which might be useful for any functional area or any area within the organization, they would collect the information, analyze it, and pass it to all people concerned or to all departments concerned in the organization. Well, we'll have more of this later. Right now, let's move on to the next slide. Furthermore, in performing an external audit, let's see this slide here, that the sources of information would include the internet, it would include libraries, corporate libraries, university libraries, public libraries. It could also include suppliers and distributors, customers, competition itself. So, as we have seen, that this method of collecting information is not only limited to reading journals and reading newspapers and keeping an eye on the magazines. No, there is something more to it. Our own customers can be a good source of information. Talking to a customer will always give you a whole array of different informations coming from the market or coming from the field, so as we call it. Similarly is the case with suppliers. Any supplier who is supplying goods to us or who is supplying raw material to us would not probably be restricting himself to only dealing with us, with my organization. He might be going around and supplying his goods and services to other organizations as well. Or he might be, if not doing it himself, he might be knowing other services, other service organizations or other material supplying organizations who go around giving the same kind of services or products or raw material or whatever to my competitors, for example. So talking to them would also help. Same is the case with intermediary channels, distributors, for example, retailers. Retailers, in fact, are one of the best sources because they are the people who are directly in contact with our customers. So if we want to know something about the customer and if we cannot reach the customer himself, the next best thing would be to talk to the retailer. So these are again other ways and means of gathering information as far as competitive intelligence is concerned. In this context, I might also add here, as I have said, that usually organizations, they ask a couple of executives to take up this extra task. But the best thing would be to delegate this responsibility, to make it absolutely clear that so and so and so persons are responsible for gathering this information, so that there is a definite setup in this regard as well. Key factors, as we have seen, these external factors, they might vary over the period of time, and they might vary also from industry to industry. In some industries, the changes and the variations come fast. In some, they do not come as fast. And in some, they come for a short while, in some, they come for a long while. However, we need to be aware of this fact that key factors can change over a period of time as well as from industry to industry. Well, here is a slide where we can see, under the context of performing an external audit, what are the variables. And these variables could include the market share, the breadth of competing products, world economies, foreign affiliates, proprietary account advantages. And to continue on to the next slide, we see that price competitiveness, technological advancements, interest rates, pollution abatement are some of the variables that can be important in performing an external audit. These variables, as I have shown you on the slide, for example, the market share. Now you see, the market share itself is something which every organization strives to enhance and enhance and enhance. In fact, organizations, they struggle tooth and nail in order to achieve and accomplish every bit or acquire every bit of the market share that they can. So this is very good an example of a variable which might change and which needs to be assessed and examined on a continual basis. Likewise is the case with competitive products. You see, when there are competing products and when there are not only one or two products, when there is a whole range of products, then we need to keep our eye on the entire breadth of the product. It could be that the competitor comes out with a new change or with a new modified product, or he adds a new product to his existing range of products and increases his breadth of offerings. So we need to keep ourselves very alert to this, very sensitive to the changes that are taking place, and then incorporate those changes into our study and see how do these changes matter to us, how do they make a difference to us. And once we can incorporate that into our study of performing or into the performance of our external audit, then we will be able to make good use of this information. On the other hand, we have world economies. You see, over the last so many decades, we have seen that the world economy is continuously fluctuating. There are countries which go up with a boom, and there are countries which come down with a crash. In fact, well-developed countries or developing countries well on their way to success, becoming success stories, they have suddenly crashed as well. And these world economies, or these changing world economies, continuously changing, there are a kaleidoscope of these changing economies. They always have a direct effect on our businesses. Why? Because businesses today are no longer independent. Businesses around the world are interdependent. From country to country, from region to region, businesses of one region are interdependent on businesses of another region. So therefore, we need to be very careful in analyzing and studying the world economy. And then we also talked about the proprietary account advantages. At times, we have certain proprietary rights, you see, and those proprietary rights over a product or over a design or over a process gives us certain advantages. Somebody else may have those advantages. We could possibly even make a sort of an alliance or a joint venture to acquire those advantages also. So they need to be carefully studied on a continual basis again. As you have noticed on the screen again, we talked about price competitiveness. We talked about technological advancements, interest rate, and pollution abatement. Now, price competitiveness is again something which gives us an edge, and any organization worth its name would spend or give away its right arm, so to say, in order to achieve this competitive advantage. And the competitive advantage is such a factor that if any organization brings about a competitive advantage change by way of a price, it's bound to affect all other organizations working in that particular industry. And therefore, we need to be very careful, we need to be very conscious of the price competitiveness. Technological advances, well, with the advent of the computers, with the advent of the information technology, the way the mobile technology or mobile telephony has gone up, cell phones and the use of cell phones, for example, these are two tremendous revolutions, as I said earlier, which we have witnessed in our lifetime. You students should consider yourselves to be very fortunate that in your lifetime you have seen two very important revolutions which will have a far-reaching consequence on industry, on businesses all over the world, and you have been a witness. And these technological changes, advancements, see how much of a change they may have brought in the lives of people, see how much of a change they have brought to organizations or to firms as such. And therefore, they are also variables, important variables that we need to keep investigating and assessing while performing an external audit. And finally, pollution abatement. I have spent a lot of time in our last lectures, in our last sessions, talking to you about pollution, talking to you about our planet Earth being a stakeholder in all that we do. Well, here is again the same topic which crops up every now and then. Pollution is something which we need to be very, very conscious about. Not only if we are creating this pollution, but even if there's somebody else, if there's some other organization which is being responsible, we must still be alert to this, we must still be conscious about it, and we must try and do away with this pollution business as much as we can. It is an important variable, it makes a difference to us, it makes a difference to people at large, and therefore it will obviously have that trickle-down effect and make a difference to our organization as well. Well, here we talk about key external factors, and these key external factors, they are usually oriented to long-term and annual objectives. They need to be, or they usually are, measurable, they are applicable, or they need to be applicable to all competing firms. They should be hierarchical throughout the company, overall company, and as also on a divisional or functional area basis. Well, these external factors, as we have seen here, they must be oriented towards, or they must be directed and geared towards our long-term goals and our annual objectives. आपको याद होगा कि हमने पीछे जब बात की थी तो एनुअल ऑब्जेक्टिव्स को हमने क्लियरली कहा था और समझा था इस बात को कि एनुअल ऑब्जेक्टिव्स वो हैं या शॉर्ट टर्म ऑब्जेक्टिव्स वो हैं जिनको हम एनुअल ऑब्जेक्टिव्स कहते हैं, और एनुअल ऑब्जेक्टिव्स का ताल्लुक यूजुअली हमारे एनुअल बजट्स के साथ होता है. इसके अलावा जो लॉन्ग टर्म बेनिफिट्स या लॉन्ग टर्म गोल्स हम चाहते हैं, जिसके लिए हम हमेशा कोशिश हैं, ट्राई करते हैं, स्ट्राइव करते हैं, ये लॉन्ग टर्म गोल्स की तरफ हमारे ध्यान, हमारी तवज्जो, हमारी ओरिएंटेशन हमेशा होनी चाहिए, बिकॉज ये एक अहम एक्सटर्नल फैक्टर भी कहलाता है. फिर ये एक्सटर्नल फैक्टर्स जो हैं ये हमेशा मेजरेबल होने चाहिए. दे मस्ट बी मेजरेबल. Measurable in the sense that they must be quantifiable, they must be, one must be able to quantify them. इनको अगर हम सिर्फ ऐसे टर्म्स में बात करें कि जिनको हम मेजर ना कर सकें तो उससे हमें दिक्कत पैदा होती है. Therefore, we agree on this point कि जो हमारे external key factors होंगे, they always should be, preferably they should be measurable. And then they need to be applicable to all competing firms. इससे मुराद हमारी ये है कि कोई फैक्टर्स अगर हमें अफेक्ट करते हैं, कोई और ऐसे फैक्टर्स हैं जो हमारे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को अफेक्ट नहीं करते लेकिन किसी और दूसरी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को अफेक्ट करते हैं, एंड लाइकवाइज कुछ मज़ीद और फैक्टर्स होंगे जो किसी तीसरी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन या चौथी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को अफेक्ट करते होंगे. अब जब हम एक असेसमेंट करते हैं तो मुझे जो फैक्टर्स अफेक्ट कर रहे हैं वो हम ले लें जो किसी और को कर रहे हैं उसको भी हम इसमें ले लें, तो दैट वुड नॉट बी द राइट थिंग. The right thing would be to take those key external factors which affect all the firms that are the basis of my study. अगर मैं 4 या 5 firms को study कर रहा हूँ, उनके मुतालिक या उनके साथ अपना organization का मुआवजा करने के लिए एक external assessment कर रहा हूँ, तो मुझे इस चीज़ का ध्यान रखना चाहिए कि जो फैक्टर्स मुझे अफेक्ट करते हैं वही फैक्टर्स दूसरे ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, दीगर ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को अफेक्ट करते हों. अगर मैं ये नहीं करूँगा तो हमारी स्टडी जो है, हमारा जो असेसमेंट का जो बेस होगा वो दुरुस्त नहीं रहेगा. बिकॉज सॉस फॉर द गूस हैज़ टू बी सॉस फॉर द गैंडर. जो एक चीज़ एक शख्स के लिए दुरुस्त है वो बाकियों के लिए भी दुरुस्त या एप्लीकेबल होनी चाहिए. So this is what we mean when we say that these factors, these key external factors, they must be applicable to all firms that are competing within the industry. And then, जैसा कि आपने देखा कि these key external factors must also be hierarchical. Hierarchical से मुराद ये है कि किसी भी organization के hierarchy को जब हम study करते हैं तो you have the top management, the leadership or the ownership, and then you have the executive management, the business level management, you have the functional area management, and then you have the front end management. So in tamam पूरे hierarchy में factors should be applicable to all of them, और उन सब के नुक्ता निगाह के मुताबिक हमें देखना चाहिए. And this should not be restricted to one area or to some areas of the organization. It must be restricted to throughout, to all the areas, to all the functional areas in the overall company. And that includes the divisional and functional areas. We have a slide here which talks about economic forces. So as you had seen the various external forces, we'll take them up one by one. And this one is concerning the economic forces. And while we are at the economic forces, we need to monitor the key economic variables. These key economic variables might include the availability of credit, the level of disposable income, interest rates, inflation rates, and they continue on as I have shown to you on the next slide, of the market rates, federal government budget deficits, gross domestic product trend, and consumption patterns. Well, students, as you have seen in this slide here, the economic forces are not only in terms of the economy as we speak of. We have several variables here under the economic purview which we need to be careful about, or which we need to assess, or which we need to keep monitoring constantly. And the first one here that we talk about is the availability of credit. Now, you could have a good economic boom period, or you could have an economic recession. In either case, the availability of the credit is affected. And if the availability of the credit is affected, most organizations are affected, whether they are manufacturing and selling product, or whether they are in the business of providing services. Let's see how it makes a difference. Well, if your availability of credit is good, if credit is available on low interest rates, money is readily available. And it's the opposite if the interest rates go up. As soon as the interest rates go up, we immediately notice a tremendous change, a tremendous effect, a rippling effect throughout the length and breadth of the economy. All organizations selling consumer goods, all organizations providing services will feel the effect, and that effect will be passed on to our consumers, and then again the consumers would probably shy away from buying goods. And once the consumers shy away from buying goods, you know exactly what's going to happen. There will be organizations which might have to shut down. There would be organizations which will have to cut down their employees, you see, which will have to trim their organizations, and that will mean loss of jobs to the people, to the public at large. And therefore, we see and we agree on this, I hope that you also agree on this, that the availability of credit is an important variable which needs to be monitored. Similarly, the level of disposable income. You see, as we just mentioned, that the availability of money or the availability of credit makes a difference. Similarly, the disposable income. What is disposable income? We describe disposable income as that income which is left over after meeting our basic needs. جو ہماری بنیادی ضروریات ہیں زندگی کی، ان کو پورا کرنے کے بعد جو پیسہ ہمارے پاس بچ جاتا ہے اسے ہم ڈسپوزیبل انکم کہتے ہیں. اب ڈسپوزیبل انکم ہوگی تو لوگ لگژری آئٹمس کی طرف جائیں گے. ڈسپوزیبل انکم ہوگی تو لوگ ایسی چیزیں یا ایسی سروسز خریدنے کو تیار ہوں گے جو ہماری بہت ہی بیسک نیڈس نہیں کہلاتی. And that makes a big difference to the economy at large. Organizations who are in the business of providing such products or providing such services, ان کو اگر فرق پڑے گا، ان کا اگر کاروبار متاثر ہوگا تو obviously ان کو جو را مٹیریل سپلائی کرنے والے ہیں، ان کے جو سپلائرز ہیں، ان کا کاروبار میں متاثر ہوگا. And this merry-go-round again becomes a vicious circle. And then interest rates, جس کا میں نے پہلے ہی ذکر کیا ہے کہ انٹرسٹ ریٹس کس طرح ہمارے کاروبار کو افیکٹ کرتے ہیں، ہمارے آرگنائزیشن کو افیکٹ کرتے ہیں، اور اسی طرح پھر مجھے میری ذات کو افیکٹ کرتے ہیں، میرے ساتھیوں کی ذات کو افیکٹ کرتے ہیں. تو انٹرسٹ ریٹس آر آلسو an important variable which needs to be monitored. And then finally inflation rate. یہ انفلیشن ریٹ ایک ایسی چیز ہے یا ایسا ایک ہوا ہے جس سے تمام دنیا جس پہ باتیں کرتے ہیں ہم، جس کا ذکر کرتے ہیں، اور یہ آج سے ہی نہیں ہے. میں تو اپنے بچپن سے سنتا آ رہا ہوں، آپ بھی سنتے آ رہے ہوں گے، اور پرابلی آگے سنتے چلے جائیں گے آپ انفلیشن کے بارے میں، افراط زر کے بارے میں. دس انفلیشن از اگین not something which I can help single-handedly. It is not something which my organization can help single-handedly. You see, ہم اس سے تبدیل نہیں کر سکتے، ہم اس سے کم نہیں کر سکتے، ختم نہیں کر سکتے، لیکن اس کے جو ہم پہ اثرات ہیں، ہمارے آرگنائزیشن پہ اثرات ہیں، اس کو سمجھنے کے لیے اور اس سے نمٹنے کے لیے یہ لازم ہے، یہ ضروری ہے کہ ہم اس انفلیشن جیسے امپورٹنٹ اکنامک ویریبل کو کانسٹنٹلی مانیٹر کرتے رہیں. تو اس طرح آپ نے دیکھا کہ یہ کیا اکنامک ویریبلز ہیں جن کو مانیٹر کرنے کی ضرورت ہے. آئیے اب اس سے جو اگلے تھے ان کو بھی بات کرتے ہیں کہ منی مارکیٹ ریٹس کو دیکھیے. آج کے دور میں پیسہ حاصل کرنا اتنا مشکل بھی نہیں ہے، provided you can pay the right price for that money. There are stock exchanges ہیں یا منی مارکیٹس ہیں، نہ صرف ایک ملک میں کئی جگہ بھی ہیں بلکہ ویریس ریجنس میں آپ دیکھیے، مشرق سے لے کے مغرب تک there are so many of them. And round the clock ان میں کام چلتا رہتا ہے، لیکن پیسہ اویلیبل ہونے کے ساتھ ساتھ یہ دیکھنا ہوتا ہے کہ ایٹ واٹ ریٹ از دیٹ منی اویلیبل. سو دا منی مارکیٹ کیپس آن اناؤنسنگ ریٹس ایوری ناؤ اینڈ دین several times a day. And these money market rates, they affect us again. Whether we can achieve or we can acquire money at a rate which is competitive compared to our other competitors. اس سے اتنا فرق پڑتا ہے کہ one company can be successful while the other may not be successful. So again, this is an important economic variable which needs to be monitored. Likewise, فیڈرل گورنمنٹ کے بجٹ ڈیفیسٹس ہیں. فیڈرل گورنمنٹس اپنے بجٹس بیلنس کرنا چاہتی ہیں, ہمیشہ کرنے کی کوشش کرتے رہتے ہیں, اور ایک طرف ریونیوز ہیں, دوسری طرف ایکسپینڈیچرز ہیں. اینڈ ایز ون ہیز اٹ, ایز ون نوٹسز اٹ, دیٹ ریونیوز آر یوزلی ناٹ انف ٹو کور آر ایکسپینڈیچرز. سو ڈیفیسٹ بجٹس بنائے جاتے ہیں, اور ان ڈیفیسٹ بجٹس کی وجہ سے بھی آرگنائزیشنس پہ خاطر خواہ افیکٹ ہوتا ہے. اور اس لیے ہم کہتے ہیں کہ ہمیں فیڈرل گورنمنٹ کے بجٹ ڈیفیسٹس کو بھی دیکھنے کی ضرورت ہے. بلکہ نہ صرف فیڈرل گورنمنٹ, ایٹ ٹائمز ایون دا پروونشل گورنمنٹ اپنے ڈیفیسٹس پورے کرنے کے لیے مختلف تراکیب استعمال کرتی ہیں, مختلف طریقے استعمال کرتی ہیں, اینڈ وی نیڈ ٹو مانیٹر دوز ایز ویل. پھر اکنامک فورسز کے مد میں رہتے ہوئے آپ دیکھیں گے کہ جی ڈی پی کا بھی انفلیشن ریٹس کی طرح ہر جگہ آپ دیکھیں گے اس کی بات ہوتی ہے. ان فیکٹ موسٹ آف اس وی آر کنسرنڈ اباؤٹ دا جی ڈی پی. تو جی ڈی پی کے ٹرینڈس کبھی اوپر جا رہے ہیں, کبھی نیچے جا رہے ہیں, ہوپ فلی اوپر ہی جاتے رہے ہیں, بٹ ایٹ ٹائمس دے گو اپ فاسٹر. 9% گروتھ ہوئی ہم سمجھتے ہیں, سنتے ہیں, اینڈ دین نیکسٹ ایئر سنتے ہیں کہ جی گروتھ ہیز گون ڈاؤن ٹو مے بی 7% اور ایون لیس ایٹ ٹائمس. تو یہ جو فرق ہے کہ بھئی جی ڈی پی کا ٹرینڈ اوپر جا رہا ہے, نیچے جا رہا ہے, دس ہیز اے ڈائریکٹ افیکٹ آن دی اکانومی, اینڈ دیئر فور اٹ ہیز این افیکٹ آن می اینڈ مائی آرگنائزیشن آلسو. So I have to, whenever I am conducting an external assessment, whenever I am carrying out an external audit, یا میں external factor evaluation کر رہا ہوں, EFE matrix بنا رہا ہوں, تو I have to keep an eye on the gross domestic product. Finally, consumption patterns ہے. دیکھیے consumption patterns again, جوں کنزیومرزم بڑھ رہی ہے, کنزمپشن پیٹرنس بھی ہمارے چینج ہوتے ہیں. ڈسپوزیبل انکم جیسا ہم نے پیچھے دیکھا تھا, جس کا ہم نے ذکر کیا تھا, ڈسپوزیبل انکم کی وجہ سے کنزمپشن پیٹرنس ہمارے چینج ہوتے ہیں. اف دیر از مور ڈسپوزیبل انکم اویلیبل, our consumption pattern of goods across the whole spectrum will probably go up or go down. So consumption patterns are as important as any one of the other economic variables which need to be monitored. Well, before we wind up our session today, there are some of these other key economic variables which we will continue talking about, and one of them at the top, as you see here, is unemployment trends. Next one is worker productivity levels, the value of the dollar in world markets, and the stock market trends. ان کو اگر آپ دیکھیں تو انمپلائمنٹ ٹرینڈ اتنا ہی امپورٹنٹ ہے جتنا کنزمپشن پیٹرن تھا. کنزمپشن پیٹرن اگر اچھا ہے تو جابس بھی اور نکلیں گی, چیزیں اور پروڈیوس ہوں گی اور بکیں گی. اسی طرح اگر کنزمپشن پیٹرن اچھا نہیں ہے تو آبویسلی پیپل ول لوز دیئر جاب. تو جابس کے سلسلے میں ہم دیکھتے ہیں کہ بھئی انمپلائمنٹ کے ٹرینڈس کیا ہیں. انمپلائمنٹ اگر بڑھ رہی ہے یا گھٹ رہی ہے تو obviously that will mean either economic disaster or economic well-being and flourishing economy, and that will be useful for me and my organization as well. آگے چل کر دیکھیے کہ پروڈکٹیوٹی لیولز ورکرز کے کیا ہیں. پروڈکٹیوٹی میں نے شروع میں ہی ذکر کیا تھا کہ یہ ریشیو ہے بٹوین دی آؤٹ پٹ اینڈ دی ان پٹ. تو اگر ورکر کی پروڈکٹیوٹی اچھی ہو رہی ہے, دیٹ مینس کہ اتنے ہی آؤٹ پٹ, اتنے ہی ان پٹس کے ساتھ یا اس سے کم ان پٹس کے ساتھ دا ورکر از بینگ ایبل ٹو گیو اس بیٹر آؤٹ پٹ اور مور آؤٹ پٹ. سو دا ورکرز productivity level has to be good, and there it has to be monitored constantly also. The value of the dollar or the value of the rupee. روپے کی قیمت آپ دیکھیں کہ مارکیٹ میں کیا ہے, انٹرنیشنل مارکیٹ میں کیا ہے, اینڈ لائک وائز ڈالر کی قیمت کیا ہے. ڈالر کی اس لیے میں ذکر کرتا ہوں کہ ہمارے ملک کی جو کرنسی ہے دیٹ از یوزلی کنیکٹڈ اور ریلیٹڈ ٹو دا ویلیو آف دا ڈالر. ہم لین دین بھی دنیا کے ساتھ ڈالر میں ہی زیادہ کرتے ہیں. تو ڈالر کی قیمت اگر بڑھ رہی ہے obviously that will make a difference. ڈالر کی قیمت گھٹتی ہے, that does make a difference. And the stock market trend. اسٹاک مارکیٹس اکثر آپ سنتے ہیں کہ بڑی تیزی آئی ہوئی ہے, کبھی آپ سنتے ہیں کہ جی مندے کا رجحان ہے. سو مندہ ہو یا تیزی ہو, there is always a change and that change brings about a change to my organization. That change makes a tremendous difference to my organization. And this is again part of those economic variables which we need to monitor constantly. اس کے علاوہ کچھ اور بھی ہیں جن کا ہم آج جاتے جاتے ذکر کر لیں. ایک تو فارن کنٹریز ہیں, غیر ملکی اکنامک کنڈیشنز ہیں, ان پہ ہمیں دھیان رکھنے کی ضرورت ہے. جیسا کہ آپ کو سلائیڈ میں دکھا رہا ہوں, فارن کنٹریز کے اکنامک کنڈیشنز. پھر امپورٹ ایکسپورٹ کے فیکٹرز ہیں. امپورٹ ایکسپورٹ کے فیکٹرز اگین امپورٹنٹ ہے, اور اب جب سے WTO کے نفاذ کا ہم سنتے ہیں یا WTO کے اگریمنٹ کا نفاذ جب سے شروع ہوا ہے, امپورٹ ایکسپورٹ فیکٹرز میں مزید تبدیلی آئی ہے, اینڈ وی نیڈ ٹو کانسٹنٹلی مانیٹر دیم ایز ویل. اور پھر آگے چل کے آپ مزید دیکھیں تو ڈیموگرافک چینجز. اب ڈیموگرافک چینجز کے ساتھ ساتھ ایک شفٹ آتی ہے ڈیمانڈ کی گڈز اور سروسز میں. اگر ہماری پبلک کی ایوریج ایج گھٹ رہی ہے تو آپ دیکھیں گے کہ کچھ چیزوں کی زیادہ مانگ ہو جائے گی ایز کمپیئر ٹو سم پروڈکٹس جو ایلڈرلی پرسن زیادہ استعمال کرتے ہیں. اسی طرح پریفرنسز کے بھی لائکس اینڈ ڈس لائکس کے مطابق آپ دیکھیں گے کہ ہماری ڈیمانڈس میں شفٹ آتی ہے, گڈس کے ڈیمانڈس میں بھی اور سروسز کے ڈیمانڈس میں بھی. اب یہ گڈز اینڈ سروسز کے ڈیمانڈ جو ہیں they have a direct relationship with our industrial assessment. They have a direct relationship with the situation that prevails in the industry, whatever industry are involved in. And therefore the organization has to per se keep a close watch, a close monitoring system on the on the demand shift for goods and services. اسی طرح انکم ڈفرینسز ہیں بائی ریجن اور بائی کسٹمر. ایک علاقے کے کسٹمرز جو ہیں ان کے انکمز اتنی زیادہ نہیں ہیں, دوسرے علاقے کی انکم زیادہ ہو سکتی ہیں. ہمارے ملک میں ایسے علاقے ہیں جو اکنامکلی بہتر حالات میں ہیں, ان کی اکنامک آمدنیں زیادہ ہیں دوسرے علاقوں کے نسبت. سو اس میں بھی ہمیں ذہن میں رکھنا پڑے گا, بیکاز دی ایریا ویئر وی فنکشن, دی مارکیٹس دیٹ وی سرو اینڈ دا مارکیٹس دیٹ وی کیٹر فار, دے ہیو اے بیئرنگ آلسو آن آر آرگنائزیشنز اینڈ آن آر ایکسٹرنل اسیسمنٹ. سو ایکسٹرنل اسیسمنٹ کرتے وقت ہمیں اس چیز کا بھی خیال رکھنا چاہیے. سو اس کے ساتھ اسٹوڈنٹس آج اس سیشن کو ہم یہاں ختم کرتے ہیں, اور آئندہ اگلے سیشن میں ہم اسی ٹاپک سے, ایکسٹرنل اسیسمنٹ کے ٹاپک سے ہی ہم پھر آپ کے ساتھ حاضر ہوں گے. اب مجھے اجازت دیجیے. خدا حافظ.